Okay, let's talk about how to set up a file share and configure NTFS permissions. Now, let's start by taking a look at what we have in Active Directory. So I'm going to go to Tools and Active Directory Users and Computers. And when that comes up, we'll look at our users here, and you'll see a bunch of things that were preloaded, but you're also going to see a user here, James Winston, another user, Diane Wilson. You're going to see a couple of groups that we've created already called production and management. Now, these are domain or global groups. So, if you remember from our previous conversations, the way that rights management should work, NTFS permission management, get the right thing there, is we put users into global groups. And the purpose of global groups is to aggregate users. And so if we pull up the production here, we'll see that we have a couple of members of our production group. So we're aggregating users in that group. Then so users go into global groups, which aggregate users. Global groups then should be placed into domain local groups, and then domain local groups have rights. Now we haven't created the domain local groups yet, so let's go ahead and do that real quick. And I'm going to create a couple of them. So I'm going to right click and new, and I'm going to choose group. There it is. And I'm going to make this production access. I'm going to make this a domain local group, and it's still going to be a security group. And I'll hit OK. And then I'm going to create a new one. This time I'll do it from up here. Create a new group called Management Access. It's going to be a domain local group, and we'll hit OK. Now, I know this sounds like a lot of extra work, but in the long run, it actually does make a lot of sense. As we put users into global groups, we can replicate permissions just by adding users to those same global groups. By setting rights to using domain local groups, it allows us a lot of flexibility with that, with those permissions. And then by adding those global groups to domain local groups, we can associate those permissions with those groups of aggregated users. So I know it sounds confusing at the moment. When I was studying this, one of the things that was recommended is you just chant global into local until it sticks. And ultimately it does, and the more you work with it, the more you realize that it actually makes sense. All right, so now I have my management access group and my production access group. And I'm going to go ahead and associate those with these global groups. So I'm going to open up the global group, and I can see its members. In management, we only have one member, Diane Wilson. So I'm going to go to member of, and I'm going to add it to management access. And hit OK. And it's not finding it. So whoops, I went too far. Stop that. All right, member of, add management access. There we go. I must have mistyped it before. Now I can also do this so we opened up the global group and added it as a member of the domain local group. I can also open up the domain local group and go to members and add, and this one's going to be production. And I mistyped it, but there we go. All right, there's production. So now I can set permissions. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this for the moment. And we're going to go to File Explorer and our C drive. And here I'm going to create a folder, and I'm going to call this folder Shared. And this is what I'm actually going to share, is going to be this particular folder. And what I'm looking for here is to minimize share points. The fewer share points I have, the better off things are, honestly. So I can control permissions underneath those shares in different folders. We'll take a look at how that works right now, actually. Let me create a new folder, and I'm going to call this one Production. And then I'm going to create another new folder for Management. And then I'm going to create another new folder for public, just for the fun of it. Now, by sharing the folder called shared, then management users will have access to their information, so will production users. Everybody will have access to public. At least we're going to set that up here in a minute. Now, here's what I'm going to want to see happen. I want management, the management access group, to have read-write access to this folder. For the production folder, I'm going to want to have the production group have read-write access, and I'm going to want the management group to have read-only access. So I want them to be able to see, but not be able to make any changes. And for the public folder, I want everybody to have full permissions. So that's what we're aiming for. So I'm going to right-click on Management and go to Properties. I'm going to look at its security, and this is going to tell me what we have right now. So creator owner has some special permissions. System has, well, everything. And you see how these are grayed out? I can't change those because they're inherited. Administrators have full control, and users have read and execute list folder contents and read. Now, these are all inherited. I don't want to deny permissions. Never ever deny permissions if you don't have to. It'll come back and bite you later. So if you can get away without denying permissions, your better option is to not allow permissions. So that's what I want to do. If we just don't allow, if it's not explicitly allowed, it's implicitly denied. So we normally don't have to explicitly deny everything, even though we have that option. But this is management, and by default, everybody is a member of the users group. So what I want to do is I want to stop this from inheriting. So to do that, I go to Advanced, and then I disable inheritance. Now at this point it asks you a question. I really wish it wouldn't. Here are your options. Convert inherited permissions to explicit permissions or remove inherited permissions. You almost never want to remove inherited permissions because that's going to take away system permissions and administrators and creator owner, and those are special permissions that you really want to have. So what you do is you convert inherited permissions, and now all of these are inherited from nothing. So now I can take out these permissions that I don't want people to have. Let me actually do that back at the previous screen. So I'm going to hit apply and OK, and now you'll see these are explicit permissions. So I want to remove these. So I'm going to click on this one, edit, and now I can remove users. So I just go down to users, remove, apply, OK. Normally I'd go ahead and set more, but there they are. System still has permissions, administrator still has permissions. So now I want to add the management access group with read and write permissions. So I'm going to edit, I'm going to add, and I'm going to choose management access. Check name to make sure I typed it right. I did not. I'm going to double check and just make sure that I spelled it right in Active Directory because that's the second time I've done this. M-A-N-A-G-E-M-E-T. That looks right. I'm going to try this again, see if I typoed it. Let me do management, check name, and then just select management access. That'll keep it from arguing with me. And hit OK. Now, I want read and write permissions. Typically, what happens when you allow permissions is it gives this. Read and execute list folder contents and read. And so our temptation is to come down here and click write. Well, when people say they want read and write permissions, what they really mean is they want modify permissions, not read and write. In fact, if you just click modify, it will add write in there. So when they say read and write, they really mean give me modify permissions. So I'm going to apply, OK, and OK. And now, come back here, my management has read and write permissions. Now nobody else does. Let's go to our production group. So I'm going to open up, whoops, do this the right way, right-click on production, go to properties. And for this, let me do security. For this one, I want management to have read permissions. I want production to have read and write permissions. I don't want anyone else to have any permissions. So that means I have to remove users. So again, I'm going to go to Advanced, Disable Inheritance, convert, and now I'm going to edit these from here. So I'm going to click on users, remove, users, remove. Now where we did it before gives us the ability to do basic permissions. Basic permissions are actually groups of special permissions. Don't need to worry about that too much now, since 95% of what you can do can be done using basic permissions. But you can edit it in either one. So I'm going to add, and I'm going to select my principal, and I want to add management. And because I've done so good at typing this, I'm going to select it and hit OK. And for management access, they need read access. Now, again, read doesn't mean read. Read means read and execute, list folder contents, read. That's fine. This also lets us know that this applies to this folder, subfolders, and files underneath it. All right, this is what we want. So we're going to click OK. Now you'll notice this gives us some more options. Normally we really don't need them, but they are there in case you do. And later on, in a little more detailed look at NTFS, we might explore them a little bit farther. So let me add, so management gets read access. I'm going to add, select my principal, and that's going to be production. And check name and production access. And production access needs read and write. But remember, read and write almost always means modify. So I'm just going to click modify. And now, just so you know, you normally won't need to do this, but just so you know, you can also click on Show Advanced Permissions, and that's going to give you more detailed permissions. Basic permissions are basically just groups of these advanced permissions. So you normally don't have to do this unless you're doing something really, really off the wall and unusual, and sometimes that happens. So that's where it's at. Let's go ahead and hit OK. So now, production access has modify, management access has read and execute. So let's go ahead and apply and OK. All right, so now we've set permissions for management and we've set permissions for production. Now for public, what I want is I want everybody to have read and write or modify permissions. So this one I'm going to do a little bit differently. I'm going to right click and go to properties and security. Now users, everybody is a part of users. And users already have, due to inheritance, read and execute list folder contents and read permissions. I just need to bump those permissions up. But for this, I technically don't need to block inheritance. I could, and then add users with those additional permissions. Or I can just click Edit, and for my users, I can add modify permissions. And that's going to add write, and then I click apply and OK. And so now read and execute list folder contents and read are inherited, but modify and write are explicit. And that's actually going to accomplish the goal for me. So now management has read access or modify access to the management folder. Let's just double check our work here real quick. Security. Go to management access, and there are permissions, and specifically I want to make sure they don't have anyone else here. Creator, owner, sister, and admin should probably be there all the time. So my only other one is a management access, which means somebody who is not a member of management access doesn't get permissions. If it's not explicitly allowed, it's implicitly denied. And then production. We'll take a look at their permissions, and production access has modify permission. Management access has read permission. So if I add somebody to management access, then they're going to get read permission, but they don't get modify permission until I make them a member of production access. There's one other way that we can look at this. So I'm going to right click on this. I'm going to go to properties, security, and advanced. And there's a tool here called effective access. So I'm going to click on effective access. I'm going to say, what does this look like for? And I'm going to select a user. Diane Wilson. See if I spelled her name correctly. Hey, I did. Diane Wilson. I'm not going to pick a device here, but I want to view her effective access on C production shared. So I pick her, and then I can add which device she's coming to, and user and device claims, and we're not going to worry about any of that at the moment. I can look at what this would look like if I added her to additional groups, but we're just going to click View Effective Access. And Diane Wilson is going to have basically all permissions right now. Let's take a look and see if we can find out why. So I'm going to cancel this, and I'm going to go to Tools and Active Directory Users and Computers. From Active Directory Users and Computers, I'm going to open up Diane Wilson's account, and she is a member of, and look here, we have her as a member of Domain Admins, Management, and Production. So let's see what happens if we take her out of Domain Admins, and let's take her out of Production, and we're just going to make her just Management. Apply, OK. So now that she's just Management, minimize all of these things. I have way too many things open. Come back here, go to C Drive, Shared, and I'm going to open up Manage. Whoops, I'm not going to open up Management. I'm going to right click on Production, go to Properties, Security, Advanced, and now let me do Effective Access. Select a user, Diane, and view her effective access. The changes haven't taken effect yet. Okay. Close one of those. Cancel that. Close one of those. There we go. They just both went down. Let's go back to Active Directory Users and Computers. And let's look at Diane Wilson again. And member of, she's just domain users, she's just management. So now what we're just waiting for, yes, I know. Now we're just waiting for her group memberships to update. And once her group memberships update, then we should see that her access has been limited. So, wrong thing. Security, advanced. And effective access, select a user, Diane, view effective access. All right, that still hasn't updated. I'm going to go ahead and pause this. We're going to give it a couple of minutes to update, and then we're going to come back and look at it again. Okay, I needed to log out and try to log in as Diane Wilson in order for it to refresh her group memberships, but we did it. We have her group memberships refreshed now. So if I go to Production and Properties and Security and Advanced, I can go to Effective Access, select a user, and I'm going to find Diane. And now, if I view Effective Access, she only has read permissions because she is a member of the Management Access Group. And remember, management doesn't have full control here. However, if I look for, whoops, I didn't want to go back that far. If I look for James, who is a member of our production group, and look at his effective access, he has modify permissions, which doesn't include full control and a few other things like that. But he's got modify permissions, so our permissions are now working. All right, one other thing I want to do here real quick. I want to create two other folders. And I'm not going to worry about permissions. I want to show you something else on this. I'm going to create one called Confidential and one called Archive. Now we've already shown how to do permissions on the management, production, and public. So for these, if we want to set permissions, we'd do it the same way. But the other thing I want to show you is this. I'm going to right click on Archive, go to Properties, and under Attributes, I'm going to look at Advanced Attributes. And I'm going to select Compress Contents to save space. And what that does is that will archive or compress that folder. So everything goes in there. It's like zipping anything that goes in there, so it'll save space on the hard drive. In the confidential, I'm going to set another advanced property, and that is encrypt contents to secure data, and hit OK. And now anything that goes in here is going to be encrypted using EFS. Now there's not really a quick way to view this, at least by default. The archive one, we can see that it's supposed to be two arrows pointing to indicate that it's compressed. But we really don't have a way of seeing that this is confidential with EFS encryption. So what we can do is we can change our view and go to our options and view. And there is an option here to show encrypted or compress the NTFS files in color. There we go. And apply and OK. And now anything that's compressed is going to show up in blue. And anything that is encrypted is going to show up in green. Now, one more thing. We've got our file structure the way we want. Now we need to share this. So I'm going to go back to the C drive, and I'm going to right-click on Shared, go to Properties, and I want to use Advanced Sharing because that's going to give me some more options. So Sharing and Advanced Sharing. I'm going to share this folder, and it's going to default to Shared. I can name it whatever I want. But here's the other things that it gives us. This is how many users, which is like 16 million users simultaneously or something like that. It's a ridiculous number. I want to go to permissions, and it's going to default to everyone with read only. Well, I don't want that. I want everyone to have full control. Now, here's why we're doing this. If we share with everyone having full control, then NTFS permissions will control what they're actually allowed to do. So, but if I have everyone with the share permissions of read, then NTFS won't give you more permissions than that. They still won't be able to get above read level permissions. And there's some more little interactions here between shared permissions and NTFS permissions, but the big thing to know is this. When you access files over a share and you have both share permissions and NTFS permissions, the most restrictive wins. So if I give everybody full control at the share level, because I really don't have a whole lot of control that I can do here. I mean, I've just got three options: full control, change, or read. If I give everybody full control, then I can use NTFS permissions to restrict what they're actually allowed to do. All right, so I'm going to apply, OK, 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 and I have now shared my folder. So that's basic file sharing and NTFS permissions in Windows Server.